All right. Let's take a look at the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks, of course, eliminated from the playoffs. And so if you're a Sharks fan, might be a little bit fresh. Of course, with all the controversy that was going around with the Sharks this year, I don't know, might have been better the Sharks didn't win it. And I say that as somebody that honestly I was hoping for Erik Karlsson to get a Stanley Cup ring this year. I was. And it sucks that he didn't get it. He only played 53 games and then he's injured again in the playoffs. And we'll see where things end up with him this summer. Now, when you look at the San Jose Sharks and you look at their record, one word comes to mind: consistency. 101 points this year, 46-27-9 record. Last year, they're 45-27-10. That's 100 points. The year before, 46-29-7. That's 99 points. And the year before, 46-30-6 for 98 points. So next year they get 102 points. Well, we're good with that then. They're back. They're still in the playoffs. They were in the finals in 2016. They were out in the first round in 2017. Second round in 2018. And this year, of course, they're out in the conference finals as victims of the St. Louis Blues after knocking out Vegas in 7 and knocking out Colorado in 7. And I know everybody gets all like, oh, there's all these conspiracies. Here's the thing. St. Louis couldn't hit an empty net in that game 3. They missed it. That's how that works. And then San Jose tied it. And in the overtime in game 6, the San Jose Sharks were able to score shorthanded. And in game 7, as much as everybody talks about all these things that happened with Vegas in the game 7, oh, that major penalty. Hey, once it gets to overtime, San Jose won it. So, anyways, that being said, and I know that's going to color a lot of people's opinions about the San Jose Sharks. So I fully expect a lot of people to say, well, the Sharks, we hope they fall apart. I don't think they're going to, but they're in for some challenges. San Jose's been very, very consistent. Doug Wilson's been able to put a team on the ice every year that manages to make the playoffs 9 times out of 10. This year, though, is one year that seems to stand out because they're second in goals for, they're 21st in goals against. That's not a recipe for success in the playoffs. Having poor defensive numbers just comes back to haunt you. And it's not all on Jones, but Jones's numbers do need to be better. He was 896 in the regular season, 898 at the end of the playoffs. Certain points in the playoffs, he got as high as 905, I think, 906, maybe 908. But at the end of it, he's down to 898. Now, over his career, he has a save percentage of 912. And last year, he had a save percentage of 915. So if he can get back to that, you're in good shape. And he does have a Stanley Cup ring that he won as a backup for the LA Kings back in 2014. He is signed at a cap hit of $5.75 million until 2024. When his save percentage is 915, that looks pretty good. When his save percentage is 896, it looks less solid. So really, Martin Jones is going to play a large role in what happens with San Jose from here. Because if they do find that they lose players this summer, due to the fact that there's so many unrestricted free agents, there's going to be more pressure on Jones. But maybe they come up with a better defensive structure. Because in the playoffs, the one thing that really stood out to me is just how sloppy they were defensively. And that first pass that is so important, and they just didn't seem to have it a lot of the time. So it was their offensive skill that made up for it during the season. And then in a postseason, when you're against the same team for, maximum 7 games, they can figure out that weakness and they can exploit it. Vegas had them down 3-1 with it and then lost 3 in a row. Colorado just didn't quite have what it took in the end, but it was close. And then St. Louis took them out. Now, if you're excited about the draft and you're a Sharks fan, I have a question for you. Why? The Sharks won't be at the draft. They don't have a first or a second this year, and they don't have their first next year either. They went all in on this year for a Stanley Cup run, and not getting the cup makes that hurt that much more. So they don't have their own picks, and they don't have a third in 2020 either. They don't have a fourth this year, so they have a third-round pick this year, and they have a second-round pick next year. And, and then after that, it's a crapshoot. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Sharks do, whether or not Doug Wilson looks and says, you know what, we can get into the draft. Maybe he moves somebody to pick up a 4th rounder or another 3rd rounder or something. because it's unusual to see a team without draft picks that doesn't try to get something. Doesn't try to get something back. Now, the good news is San Jose's scouting seems to be pretty darn solid. There always seems to be players coming into the lineup that we've never heard of that end up being pretty good players at the end of their careers. And we look back and go, wow, San Jose developed them really well. Now, that still is happening. The San Jose Barracuda have been doing a good job of developing players to play for the San Jose Sharks. Right now, they have $58.3 million spent of an $83 million cap. We focus a lot on the players going out. I think it's worthy of note that there could be players coming back. They have a lot of cap space. Maybe Matt Duchene would fit here if they decide that Pavelski's asking price is too high, or maybe he's too fragile at this point. Maybe they take a look in another direction. Maybe with Thornton. Maybe if Thornton leaves, maybe they keep Pavelski and they still bring in a Duchene. There's a lot of things that they can do. They'll have to get creative, though. And Evander Kane's $7 million cap hit until 2025 is interesting because I know he scores a lot of goals, but it feels like when everything's all said and done, we're still talking about either mental mistakes he makes or his temper or, going invisible at the absolute worst possible time. So when we look at unrestricted and restricted free agents that played for the Sharks this year, or just of note, Donskoy does stand out as a guy that I've always liked him. I do think he needs a change of scenery. I think his time in San Jose's come to an end. Haley, do they keep him? Do they not? If they decide to keep him, they won't have to pay a lot of money to do that. Pavelski is going to be the big guy. Team captain, face of the team. I would be very surprised if he doesn't stay with the Sharks. That being said, Marleau surprised everybody by going to Toronto a couple years ago, and maybe Pavelski's up. Because, turning 35, you're in that range where, I don't know, how much do you want to pay and for how long, and you don't want to pay too long of a contract. So somebody's going to step forward and probably pay him and give him too much of a term. This is why when Vancouver gets rumored, I go, yeah, that probably matches up. Joe Thornton, of course, is likely to retire. 21 years in the NHL, great career. I think he's probably going to retire. I'd be surprised if he comes back again next year. But we can put an asterisk on that. I was surprised he came back this year. So I thought last year with the way he was unable to skate and both of his knees were going on him, I thought, well, he's not coming back next year. And then he came back. Nyquist is an interesting one. Do you look at Nyquist and say, well, he only had one goal in the playoffs? Or do you look and say, his points per 60 minutes weren't bad and he had overall good stats, we can bring him back? And what do you do there? Or do you just let him go as an unrestricted free agent? I think they're going to let him go. I do. And that's another one of those expensive rentals, because when you look at it, they didn't get to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they really don't have a ton of draft picks this year. Erik Karlsson, unrestricted free agent this summer. I think he's going to end up getting overpaid. I think it's going to be one of those contracts people talk about later on as being a mistake. And I just, that's the feeling I get, that he played hurt a lot last year in Ottawa. I think he played hurt a lot this year in San Jose. And I think that should damage his stock as a UFA. The thing is, all it takes is two teams to get a bidding war going, and next thing you know, he's making $11 million a year. Tim Heed, unrestricted free agent. Underrated. I think Heed is underrated as a defenseman for San Jose. I like Tim Heed. I think he's a guy that if he played in a more easterly original six type environment, I think he'd be talked about a lot more. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes unrestricted. I wouldn't be surprised if Montreal jumped in to grab him to replace the expiring Jordy Ben if they don't bring back Ben. On the restricted free agent market, LeBanc. What is Kevin LeBanc worth right now? He has these great games where he scores, like against Vegas. He had the 4 points in that insane power play. But then he can go quiet too. So from here, if you're Wilson, you have to decide which is the real LeBanc and how much he's worth to you. And I think Kevin LeBanc has a lot of upside. That being said, he does tend to go kind of invisible at times as well. This is why I'm glad I'm not a general manager. Timo Meier is going to be the big price tag. Timo Meier has superstar written all over him, and I would be very surprised if he doesn't make a ton of money this summer. Gambrell is a restricted free agent. He, of course, scored a goal in their last game against St. Louis. It's notable. He's not going to get a big raise out of it, though. Joakim Ryan has arbitration rights as a restricted free agent. Won't get a big raise either. If you're looking for prospects that could help San Jose, Ryan Merkley's notable in that, again, they develop players very well in their system. When Merkley's ready, he'll make his debut for sure. Mario Ferrero, Jeremy Roy. I think, and I'm assuming it's Roy because he came out of the Quebec League. I'm figuring Jeremy Roy probably gets his shot at the main roster next year, depending on which of these players ends up moving out. But we'll see. Jonathan Dahlen, I think, is an interesting case for call up. There are some Vancouver fans that are still upset that he got traded at the deadline. He didn't fit into Vancouver's long-term plans. I don't think it's that big a deal, but we'll see. If he develops for San Jose and becomes a star player for them, Canuck fans will rue the day forever, right? But that's something that we'll see what happens with him. And again, it depends how many of the veteran players leave, either as free agents or through retirement. And Maxim Latunov, center, restricted free agent this summer, but he's 23 years of age. I assume that San Jose is going to keep him, and they may have some plans to throw him into a bottom six role as well. And Tony Sund, out of Finland. I don't need to say the Finland. Out of Finland, Tony Sund, 23 years of age, was signed on May 9th. They didn't sign him on May 9th just to send him to the Barracuda. He's going to have a shot at cracking the roster this fall. But the key thing for me with San Jose is there's not a lot of explosive star talent coming up. And I do think that they could very well fall back. That we could be looking at a team next year that maybe barely makes or barely misses the playoffs. They may very well be one of those teams scrambling. They struggled down the stretch. They didn't look very good going into the playoffs. And then they turned it on, but it still took being down 3-1 to turn it on. So for San Jose, there's a Jekyll and Hyde team here, and we'll see how they turn out next year. But I do still see them as probably being a team that makes the playoffs. But then I look at what happened with Anaheim this year. I look at San Jose's roster. Anaheim got older, had all these guys that were older, and I think that hurt them this year. And next year, I think Anaheim's going to get better. But for San Jose, it could very well be an exodus. We'll see who leaves and who stays. That'll really tell us whether San Jose is resetting and going back into the playoffs next year, or if Doug Wilson looks and says, you know what, this has been great, but this core needs to be changed out. Very interesting summer on the way. A lot of cap space there if guys walk away. And interesting to see who ends up taking it. And that's one thing. If Karlsson did sign with San Jose, he'd get what? You got to think at least $10 million. That would take him to $68 million pretty quick. And then you got Pavelski, Nyquist, and Meyer as a restricted free agent is going to make some serious money. I don't think they can afford to keep Karlsson if they want to keep everybody else there. But it's going to be an interesting summer. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.